Sony made a huge announcement that will have big ramifications for the gaming industry, but why did they do it and why now? Let's take a look at the physical games discussion in this video and of course more gaming news, because incoming are big Xbox layoffs. I got an update on Black Flag because that's of course coming out soon, and way more. So good at joining the Sunday news roundup. And let's go. Yes, you've likely heard the news already. Sony is ending physical disc production for new PlayStation games starting in January 2028. This means that new first-party but also third-party games releasing after 2027 can only be bought digitally through the PlayStation Store or through retailers in a different form. And it's still unclear what that will look like. Sony told their partners that they will provide publishers with the opportunity to release new games at retail using digital codes starting in January 2028. But is that a code inside a regular game case like GTA 6 is doing? Or it could also be simply a download card, similar to today's PlayStation Store gift cards, meaning that the physical boxes disappear altogether. But GameFile also reports that games released before January 2028 can still be printed on a disc throughout 2028 and beyond. So the reason Sony gives for this sudden change is that this is a natural direction for Sony Interactive Entertainment to adapt to consumer trends, as the general preference for digital media significantly outpaces physical discs. This transition will enable us to align more closely with how most of our community prefers to access and play games today. Yes, that's really a non-answer, because they are removing an option rather than improving the digital experience in any meaningful way. I will get to the real reason why Sony is likely doing this in a moment, but first, this obviously sucks. For one, games become even less affordable for a certain group of players who rely on selling older physical games to fund new purchases, or who mainly buy games second-hand. After 2027, new releases can never enter the second-hand market. Physical games also tend to receive bigger discounts because retailers eventually need to clear inventory, and that largely disappears as well once everything becomes digital codes. Many physical games also continue to work without an internet connection, meaning that you could always go back and play them years later. That's much less the case with a full digital library, although it is worth noting that this has already started changing in recent years, with many discs no longer containing the full game or requiring a day one update before you can properly play them. So in those cases, the disc already wasn't fully self-contained. Now, last week Sony also announced that it would remove more than 550 purchased movies from users' libraries without offering a refund. Now, nothing similar has happened with games yet, apart from online services of course shutting down, although in those cases the physical version also becomes largely unusable. Still, it serves as a reminder that these companies ultimately hold the power over digital purchases. We simply don't know what happens 10 or 20 years from now. Will everything in our digital library still work then? So yeah, overall, it's bad news for game preservation and for remaining physical game stores that will inevitably lose business. There is, however, a very good financial reason why Sony is making this move. I just think that it's happening too early. Tweakdown has a nice chart showing how physical game sales have declined over the years, especially during the COVID period. Even so, Sony still sold 70 million physical games during its last financial year, which is an enormous number. More recent estimates also show that physical copies remain especially important for single-player games. According to Alinea Analytics, 2026 estimates on PS5, Resident Evil Requiem sold 27.8% physical, 007 First Light 21%, Crimson Desert 19.9%, and Ghost of Yotei even 35.4% physical. Now sure, if those numbers were below 10%, then maybe discontinuing discs would make more sense, but that's clearly not where we are today. Again, why is it happening now though? Analyst firm Catan Games recently broke down how the margins work. So this is very interesting. If a third-party publisher sells a $70 physical game, the retailer takes a 30% cut. Sony gets 15%, and publishers then also have to pay the manufacturing cost. In the end, they keep roughly $35, so half. If Sony sells its own $70 physical game, it only has to pay the retailer and the manufacturing cost, meaning that Sony keeps around $45. If we now compare that to digital, third-party publishers simply only have to pay Sony its standard 30% platform fee and keep around $49 per copy, roughly 40% more revenue than with physical sales. Sony meanwhile keeps the entire $70 digital sale, meaning that it earns roughly 53.8% more compared to selling one of its own physical games. So let's use Ghost of Yotei as an example. Again, the game sold an estimate of 1.2 million copies during 2026 and 4.8 million in 2025, so 6 million in total. Let's say 35.4% of those sales were indeed physical, just like in 2026. Then they made $367 million. Now, if all those copies were digital, that would be $420 million. So Sony would be making $50 million more. Of course, it's not going to be that black and white, but still, Sony could be making way more money. It's a massive difference. So even if Sony loses a portion of the customers because of this transition, both Sony and even third-party publishers will still make more money by moving entirely to digital. Sony's stock also rose following the announcement. And with the hardware components becoming more expensive, game budgets continuing to explode and overall profitability becoming more difficult, Sony is looking at levers it can pull to increase margins, and this is one of them. I'm not saying I agree with this decision, but when you look at the numbers, you can absolutely understand why they are doing it, and they will probably get away with it. Xbox is no longer much of a competitor in the console space, and current rumors suggest Microsoft's next platform won't include a disk drive either. There are, however, rumors that Microsoft is planning a way for players to convert their physical discs into digital copies. And Sony will almost certainly need something similar as well, otherwise people with huge PS4 and PS5 physical collections won't be able to access those on future hardware. Last year we also heard reports that the PS6 would feature a detachable disk drive, likely for backwards compatibility with PS4 and PS5 games. But of course, plans may have changed. Like, it would be nice if Sony at least confirmed that. Right now, more communication would be great, because it feels like a big middle finger to longtime PlayStation fans. I really think that we cannot fathom the repercussions that this will have. For example, also in Japan, almost half of the business there is still physical copies. So this will have a huge impact on PlayStation's home country. But I don't think they will reverse this decision, because we also learned this week that Sony's largest PlayStation disc plant is already reassigning staff to make other products. Right now, 50% of what they do is make PlayStation discs, but in 2028 they expect it to be 10%. So this is crazy. I hope they just communicate more. At least let people with a huge physical library know you can still use it on PS6 if that is the case. But right now it seems like they will just go la la la, hope it flies over. They have been quiet on social media though. After this announcement they've not talked, so maybe that will continue. But yeah, let your voice be heard if you don't like this decision for sure. Now let's move on to other gaming news. Leave a like, that would really help me out, and subscribe, because we post one of these big gaming news roundup videos every Sunday. Now it's time for quick shots, news stories I will go over quickly. The crazy thing is that by next week, this whole Sony ditching physical discs story will probably already feel like ancient news. Because this week we learned through The Verge and other sources that the Xbox layoffs are due to start on Monday, July 6th. And will hit most parts of Xbox. Rumors suggest that there could be at least 1,000 job losses, and if Microsoft goes ahead with 5 studio closures, that's already around 500 employees impacted before these wider cuts. And these 5 studios would reportedly be Double Fine, Compulsion Games, Ninja Theory, Undead Labs behind State of Decay, and even Arcane Leon, who are currently working on Blade. Blade was originally supposed to debut later this year, according to sources familiar with the game's development. I'm told the internal ship date slipped to late 2027, and it's also running over budget. And now it seems that Microsoft doesn't want to pay the game to push it over the finish line, so let's hope someone else steps in, because then you get a studio with the promise of a Blade game that will for sure be great, looking at Dishonored and Deathloop, like the games that Arcane Leon also made. I've think this would be a great fit for Sony, make Blade a PS5 exclusive, and I think you got a great win, but that's obviously just wishful thinking. We will have to wait and see what happens. And even Rare, the studio behind Sea of Thieves, might not be safe, according to a journalist from the Edge newsletter. Meanwhile, Jason Schreier confirmed that at least Obsidian, the studio behind The Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed, will survive and will probably be moved onto a new Fallout game, something that honestly should have happened a long time ago. Like, the reason behind all these cuts seems to be that Xbox does not want to invest less in gaming overall, but instead wants to focus more of its resources on franchises they believe have a huge long-term potential, like Fallout, The Elder Scrolls and Halo. We will get full confirmation of this horrible situation this coming week. I'll of course report on everything in next week's Sunday video, but yeah, it's going to be grim. This coming week, we also have good news. We get the launch of Assassin's Creed Black Flag Resynced, and Ubisoft shared new console specifications this week, including a 60 FPS mode that will be available on every console except for Series S. And I think this really shows how impressive the PS5 Pro is. Because on that console you get a 60 FPS mode with the best ray tracing and the same upscaled 4K resolution as the fidelity and balanced modes. So you basically get the best of everything. We also got another look at the Digital Deluxe Edition content, and there's still plenty of time to enter my giveaway for that edition through the link in the video description. But yeah, I'll of course have a ton of coverage on the game, tips and tricks, showcases, a review, live stream and much more, so stay tuned, it's going to be a lot of fun. Let me know if you'll pick up the game in the comments down below. And as discussed in a recent rumor roundup, Onimusha Wave the Sword is indeed moving its release date forward. Instead of launching on September 25th, it will now release 3 weeks earlier on September 4th. Which I think is actually great news for many of the other September and October releases. Like, now I can play Onimusha and then focus on Control and not have to pick between the two. Now let me know if this changes any of your purchasing decisions this fall. I'll of course keep you posted on all these big releases across my channels. In the rumor roundup, I look at the biggest leaks and rumors of the week and rate them with stars. 3 meaning I believe it, and 1 means let's take this with a huge grain of salt. So Insider Gaming reports that things are not looking good for the new Ghost Recon game. Earlier this spring, Project Over failed its alpha test, leading to major changes on the project. Sources tell me that it wasn't surprising the game failed alpha, with many saying that the game is in a terrible state and is not stable at all. Of course, these are like some of the sources, but still, that is not great to hear, and this reportedly caused Ubisoft to significantly reduce the scope of the project, with many planned features being removed simply to hit its current timeline. The article notes that the game is still targeting a beta in November, with a launch planned sometime after March 2027. Obviously, a large team inside Ubisoft Paris spent years fixing Breakpoint after its poor 2019 launch, but they've also had many years to get this new project off the ground, and they just seem unable to do it, possibly because of poor leadership steering the project. But yeah, we've also heard rumblings that the development on the next Far Cry isn't going well either. Both this new Ghost Recon and the next Far Cry really need to succeed if Ubisoft wants these franchises to return to their former heights. Now, they do at least seem to have a solid roadmap for Assassin's Creed, with Black Flag Resynced, Hexe next year, another remake likely in 2028, and potentially another RPG somewhere in between too. Rainbow Six Siege continues to perform very well, and they also seem to have a good plan for the Division, with a third game of course deep in development. But they need more to keep the entire company afloat. I'll of course keep you updated. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments down below. Maybe it's finally time for a Ghost Recon Wildlands Resynced or a Far Cry 3 remake. I can keep this coming week short because we already went over things. It's going to be fun because of the Black Flag Resynced launch. I will have again plenty of coverage ready for you, but we will also get a lot of sad Xbox news. Again, I will of course cover everything. Subscribe, leave a like, and check out my watch this before you play Black Flag video by clicking on the screen if you haven't already. I will also be live on Wednesday with the weekly news stream. Hope to see you there, and I will speak to you soon. Goodbye.